Thank you, Cindy. For, I don't know, a good number of years now, I have subscribed to a service through the phone company that's been a real blessing to me. Many of you have it on your home phone. It comes standard now on cell phones, but it's Caller ID. Caller ID is a real blessing to us. I find it a real blessing to me. It's really nice when your phone rings that before you even say hello, you have this idea because you see the name and the number of who's dialing. You have an idea before you even say hello who's on the other end. Because one of the benefits of that is that sometimes you don't want to talk to the person on the other end, right? Sometimes it's a telemarketer and you're like, I don't want to waste my time with them, and so you don't answer them. Sometimes it may be a family member or a friend, somebody that you're close to, but they're calling at just a terrible time for you, and you're too busy, you're working on a plumbing repair, you're doing something, and you just can't take the call, but you see who it is and you make the mental note, hey, I'll call them back later. And so even if they don't leave a message, you know that they have called. That's a blessing on another front. So for example, if you've been away from your home for a few hours, you come back, you look at the answering machine, there may not be any messages that have been left, but you can scroll through the caller ID and you can see, well, hey, so-and-so called, and you can call them back even though they haven't left you a message. Now, for me, that's a blessing that really comes as a double-edged sword. Because if I were, for example, to call you this afternoon and I get your answering machine or I get your voicemail, it's almost certain I will not leave a message. Because what I will do is say, okay, they're not there, they're not available, I'll call them back in a little bit. So I'll wait and then I'll call back. If I get the voicemail again, I'll wait and then I'll call back. And I'll wait and I'll call back. And I can't tell you how many times this has happened over the years that after having done so, somebody will call me that I've been trying to reach and they say, hey, Michael, is everything okay? I figured it must be important. You called me 13 times. I hate that. But, that's one of the downsides, I suppose, of caller ID. I was thinking about that reality, though, and why it is that I'm such a bad message leaver. Why it is that so many times I elect and choose not to leave a message. And I believe the reason for that, there's a couple of facets to it. And the first is this. I don't want to leave a message for you because I don't know when you're going to get the message and when you're going to call me back. And I feel bad if I've asked you to call me and then I'm unavailable, and I feel like I need to kind of hover around the phone just in the event that you call me back. But you could call me back in 2 minutes, 2 hours, or 2 days. I just don't know when. So I don't want to leave the message. And ultimately, I don't want to leave the message because I want to talk to you when I want to talk to you. I like to be in control. A lot of us are like that, aren't we? And to varying degrees, that's true of each of us. We like to be in control, and consequently, we do not like to wait. We don't want to wait on a phone call. We don't want to wait on someone to call us back. And when it comes to spiritual things, and when it comes to our walk with God, so many times we decide, I don't like this whole waiting on God thing either. I read a poem the other day that said this: patience is a virtue, possess it if you can, found seldom in a woman, but never in a man. Maybe you found that to be true, but as we live this life, and for you, if you have a personal relationship with God, and you're not just simply living this life, but you're living this life as a follower of Christ, you are going to find yourself recognizing and coming to grips with this fact, that the God of the universe wants to work in and through your life, and He wants to work around your life. But what He does and what He seeks to do and what He plans to do is going to be done only in His timing. Timing that is very often different than ours. Timing that oftentimes leads us to wait. But we don't like to wait, do we? We don't like to wait at McDonald's. We don't like to wait at Walmart. We don't like to wait at the bank. We don't like to wait on our tax refund. We don't want to wait on anything. And when it comes to waiting on God, we don't like that thought either. And so consequently, what so many times we wind up doing is this. We'll say, okay, the clock's ticking. Something's got to be done. Waiting on God, haven't heard anything. Okay, so I'm just going to go ahead and take care of this. We just go ahead and act, acting without God, acting essentially as a lone ranger. This morning we're continuing a series looking at the life of the Old Testament figure Saul, in a series that I've called The Lone Rangers. And Saul was a man like so many today that had a relationship with God. He believed in God, but in so many ways communicated through his life to God, hey, it's okay, you can keep your seat, I've got things covered from here. I can do this without you. And one of the ways that we can see that clearly demonstrated is that when given an opportunity to wait on God, Saul intentionally chose not to. So the question for us today is this. Not simply why did Saul not wait on God, but more importantly, why is it in your life that thus far, or even now, you're thinking about not waiting on Him and heading off into the sunset without Him as a lone ranger? Why is it that we do that? We see the answer to that question today in 1 Samuel chapter 13. If you would look with me in your Bibles there today, 1 Samuel chapter 13. We're going to actually deal with the first 15 verses, and we'll drop in a number of places. But again, here is the question. Why is it that so many times, when given the opportunity to wait on God, we choose not to? We take care of it ourselves. We behave as a lone ranger. Why don't we wait on Him? Well, the first reason is this. Because we believe our perspective is fully accurate. Because we believe that our perspective is fully accurate. Let me set the stage for you at this point. Saul is now Israel's first king. And he's a man about 30, 31 years old. He's in the prime of his life. He's in the second year of his reign as king. Last week we looked at his first foray into real leadership, real military leadership. And we saw this amazing victory that the Israelites were able to have. Now as we come to chapter 13, Israel is dealing once again with one of their chronic nemesis, the Philistines. And what's going on is that there is this city, this town, you see it in verse 3, of Geba. And Geba was a town that was in the heart of Israel's territory. It was 3 miles from Israel's first capital, a city named Gibeah. And what is going on is that there is a Philistine garrison, an outpost in the city of Geba. Well, Saul, as Israel's king, thinks and observes, what are they doing? This is our territory. Not just on the outskirts, but this is in the heart of our territory. It's in the city of Geba, which according to Joshua chapter 21 is a city that's to be reserved for the priests. What are these Philistines, these godless Philistines doing in that city? Beyond that, they're 3 miles from our capital. We need to get rid of these jokers. And so what he does is to get 3,000 soldiers together. And he takes 2,000 soldiers and he keeps them under his command, but he gives to his son Jonathan 1,000 soldiers. What Saul does is to position himself and his soldiers in the city and the town of Gibeah. And that was effectively to block any escape for the Philistines. And Jonathan was going to launch an assault with his 1,000 soldiers against this Philistine garrison. Well, it seems clear based on what the passage communicates to us in terms of reaction, Jonathan's soldiers had a tremendous victory. And they slaughtered these Philistines in this outpost. Because of this, we're told that the Philistines viewed the Israelites then as an abomination in verse 4, or literally a stench. I mean, the very thought of the Israelites then to the Philistines, it just kind of nauseated them. We can't stand these people. Look at what they have done, how they've humiliated, how they have just slaughtered these people. This will not stand. So the Philistines decide we're going to do something about this. In verse 5, we read that the Philistines gathered together to fight with Israel. And they began to amass their forces. 30,000 chariots. That's a lot of chariots. 6,000 horsemen. So they've got a cavalry with 6,000 horses with soldiers on them. And then an infantry. It's described people as the sand which is on the seashore in multitude. I mean, there's so many in the infantry that they cannot be numbered. Well, when you're amassing an army like this, you're not able to do so in secret. Word gets out about this. The Israelites come to discover what the Philistines are doing. And seeing this massive army that's gathering at their doorstep, they begin to think, uh-oh, we're in trouble. What are we going to do with an onslaught such as this? And so some people, in fact, many people begin to run. They're hiding in caves and any nook and cranny they can find. Others even cross the Jordan just to completely get out of Dodge. But Saul does not leave town. He doesn't head for the hills. Actually, where we find Saul is in the town of Gilgal. We see in verse 8 that as for Saul, he was still in Gilgal, and all the people following him trembling. So Saul is there, everyone is scared. Now, it's not inconsequential, and it's not by chance that Saul is in Gilgal. If you go back to chapter 10, verse 8, Samuel, the prophet of God, God's mouthpiece to his people, has given Saul this specific instruction. Go to Gilgal, wait for me there for 7 days, and on the seventh day I will come and offer sacrifices and offerings to God. That's why Saul is in Gilgal. And so he wakes up on the morning of the seventh day, and Samuel has not yet arrived. And this is Saul's dilemma. This massive army has gathered at their doorstep. It's clear they intend on launching an attack. And if you're going to launch an attack, you want surprise on your side. And so Saul thinks it's a foregone conclusion. We are going to have to fight the Philistines. There's going to be a battle. But I'd rather surprise them than them surprise us. But before we go into battle, we need God's blessings. We need to ensure that God is in this and that God is going to be on our side and that God is going to grant to us victory. And so before going into any battle, we need to go to God with sacrifices and offerings and peace offerings to ensure that we have His blessing. Well, this was an offering, this was a sacrifice that was to be provided for and offered to God by the prophet, by Samuel. But Saul has waited now 7 days and Samuel is not there. Something's got to be done. People are deserting. People are heading for the hills. People are scared to death. We're going to have to fight. If we wait any longer, they're going to surprise us. Something has got to be done. So does Saul wait anymore? No. He demands that the offering or the instruments of offering and sacrifice be brought to him, and he decides, I'm going to do this on my own. Saul intentionally chooses not to wait on God, not to wait on his man. He acts like a lone ranger and decides, I'm going to take care of this by myself. No sooner has he done this, you see it in verse 10. As soon as Saul had finished presenting the burnt offering, Samuel came. Saul went out to meet him that he might greet him. Saul's mind, everything is just hunky-dory. Hey, Samuel, how's it going? Good to see you today. And Samuel asks very sternly in verse 11, what have you done? Saul says, well, when I saw that the people were scattered from me and that you did not come to me within the days appointed, that the Philistines had gathered together at Michmash. Isn't that a great name of a town? Where are you from? Michmash. Then I said, the Philistines will now come down on me at Gilgal, and I've not made supplication to the Lord. Therefore I felt compelled and offered a burnt offering. Samuel, the enemy was gathering. People were deserting. Everyone was afraid. If I didn't go and attack them, they were going to get me while I was here in Gilgal. An offering had to be made. You weren't here. You said you were going to be on the seventh day, and the seventh day started. You weren't here. So I felt compelled to do this. I didn't wait. I felt compelled. I just had to do this. All right, so let me ask you this question. When did Samuel, the prophet of God, this mouthpiece of God, when did he say he would arrive? On the seventh day. When does Samuel show up? On the seventh day. Why is it that Saul decided, I cannot wait any longer? I cannot even wait until this day is nearly ended or until it is ended. Well, because I believe Saul was thinking this way. I know everything there is to know about this. I mean, the facts are pretty simple. They're very straightforward. All the cards are on the table. The Philistines have this massive army, and if we don't attack them first, they will attack us. People are beginning to desert. If we don't do something, we're not going to have anyone to fight on our side. Samuel, the prophet of God, was to come and offer the sacrifices. Samuel is not here. What else needs to be known? What else possibly can be known? I've got to do this and act on my own. All the cards, or so he thought, were on the table. All that could be known, or so he thought, he already knew. Regularly in our lives, regularly in your life, as one that's trying to follow the Lord and have this relationship with Him, you're going to find yourself having to wait on Him. And it could be that you're waiting on God to provide a job opportunity. Maybe it is that you're waiting on Him to bring a spouse into your life, or you're waiting on Him to bring children into your lives. Some of you are waiting for God to take children out of your lives. I don't know, it can go both ways. It could be that you're waiting on God's guidance, whether you should move to this city or you should buy this home or whether you should make this purchase or not. And countless times you're going to find yourself at the crossroads of decision, looking toward heaven, waiting on God, and that's what kind of response you get from Him. Keep waiting. Keep waiting. But we don't like waiting. We don't like having to exercise patience. We want what we want now. And so many times what we do then is to look at the circumstances and say, well, it's pretty clear. It's in black and white. A, B, C, and D, all of those things are true. There's nothing else that can be known. I need God to act. God's not doing anything, so fine. I'll take care of it myself. So we go ahead and act. That's exactly how Saul operated. We've got to have God's blessings. The man of God, the prophet of God, the mouthpiece of God is not here to do it. I'll take care of this myself. Saul, I believe, looked at his circumstances, everything that he was facing, and thought, I see everything as it is. He believed that his perspective was fully accurate. The problem is, it wasn't. The problem is, he didn't know everything. He did not know that Samuel was on his way at that very moment. In our church in Charlotte, we had a member there whose name was Jeff. And Jeff was a genuinely good-hearted guy. And as good a man as he was and as good-hearted as he was, Jeff was, and still probably to me is, one of the most annoying people I've ever known in my life. And I say that because of this. There is no one I have ever met in my life that is more motivated by food than Jeff was. And the prospect of any type of church function, and there's a lot of church functions we have where food is involved. Jeff, he would be reading the newsletter, he'd be reading the bulletin, paying attention to announcements. He knew when there was going to be food, and he was going to pester you to death about that particular event because he did not have transportation. And so if he was to get there, it was going to be because he would talk to you or pester you repeatedly to get you to pick him up. Well, every year our church had this massive annual barbecue on a Friday in February. And this particular year, Jeff had spoken to another member, a guy whose name was Buddy. And he had asked Buddy to pick him up so that he could be there to have supper that night. And so Buddy had arranged it with Jeff. He said, listen, I'll be at your house at 4 o'clock on Friday afternoon to pick you up. I'll bring you to the church, and then I'll take you back later. It was agreed upon. Everybody knew. Well, throughout the day, repeatedly, Jeff calls to try to talk to Buddy. Hey, are you coming? Yes, I told you I was coming to get you. I'll be there at 4 o'clock. So at about 3:30, I'm in the fellowship hall, and I see Buddy leave. He goes and he gets in his truck to go and pick up Jeff. All right, Buddy's been gone probably no less than 5 minutes, and all of a sudden, Jeff walks into the fellowship hall. I said, Jeff, how did you get here? He said, well, my neighbor brought me. It turns out he had talked to his neighbor and said there was this important meeting at church he had to be there for, and he didn't have a way to get there, and so they grudgingly brought him and dropped him off. Well, about 4:30, Buddy shows back up, and as soon as he sees Jeff, it's a wonder I didn't have to do a funeral that day. I mean, he was just ready to choke him. And he goes over to Jeff, and he says this. Listen, we talked about this repeatedly. I said that I was going to be at your house at 4 o'clock. I get there before 4 o'clock, and you're already gone. You've got your neighbor to come and get you. Jeff's defense was this. There was the barbecue. I needed to get there. I wanted to get there. You weren't here when I wanted you to be or when I thought you should be. Well, that's all there is to know, so I took care of it myself. Jeff thought he knew all that he needed to know. What he didn't know is that Buddy was already on his way. But that story actually has another layer of application, which is this. Jeff never got the opportunity to wait on Buddy again. He never got the opportunity to wait on Buddy again. Now hear me in this. I want to speak clearly about this. I recognize, and repeatedly the Bible presents our God as one of second chances, many times third and fourth and repeated chances when we fail Him. But hear me in this. He's never obligated to give more than one. So many times we operate on this notion, well, there'll always be another chance. But again, there may not be another chance to wait on Him if you fail in the first. We're going to see that Saul does not get an opportunity to wait on God again. And that failure to wait on Him for Saul meant that there were blessings and opportunity that he would miss out on. And for you, it may very well be that there are countless blessings and opportunities that you will miss out on because you just decide, hey, I know all there is to know about this. I can take care of. I will take care of this on my own. Why do we behave this way so many times? Well, because we think our perspective is fully accurate. When you're tempted to act without God, when you're tempted to just say, I know all there is to know, I'm going to go ahead and do something, remind yourself of this simple fact. You don't know everything. You do not know everything, and you do not know what the God of the universe is doing behind the scenes, how He is at work. So just wait on Him. Unless, of course, you want to get on your horse, head off into the sunset, just like Saul, as a lone ranger living independently from God. We do this because we think our perspective is fully accurate, but there's another reason, and that's because we believe our abilities are completely sufficient. We believe our abilities are completely sufficient. The one thing that Saul knew for sure was that before he could lead and before he would lead his soldiers into battle, they needed the blessing of God. Sacrifices and offerings needed to be rendered before the Lord. He was right about that. He also knew that this is something that was to be done by Samuel, the prophet of God, the one who said he was going to be there on the seventh day. And as the seventh day has begun, Samuel isn't there. Saul again is operating under the notion his perspective is accurate. He knows all there is to know. The enemy is afoot. People are deserting. We've got to fight. We've got to have God's blessings. The one to ask for it is not here. You know what? I've seen this sacrifice and offering thing done 1,000 times before. I can do this. Y'all bring me some of that stuff in here, and I can take care of this. Well, after all, it's a raised hand here, a lowered hand here, up, down, right foot in, left foot out. You do the hokey pokey. You do all of this stuff. I've seen this done 1,000 times before. I can do this. And so Saul told himself his abilities were completely sufficient. But the problem, very simply, was this. His abilities were not sufficient. They were insufficient for this reason. Saul was trying to do something to generate an effect of consequence on his own apart from God. He was trying to do something on his own, something of consequence apart from God, and he felt, what I bring to the table, my abilities, they are sufficient. The problem is, they were not. A number of years ago, I was asked to officiate at a wedding for some members we had at our former church. And I'd done the premarital counseling sessions for them. The wedding, though, was not going to be in Charlotte. It was actually going to be on a plantation in Charleston in late May. And on the weekend of the wedding, Caroline and I go to Charleston, and we leave that Friday morning, get down there. We check into a hotel. Early that evening, there was the rehearsal, and afterwards we went to the rehearsal dinner. And on Saturday, I've told Caroline, okay, we just need to be out at this plantation at 6 o'clock. I've got the instructions, the directions to get there, so we'll just kind of goof off during the day, and when it comes time, we'll get dressed and we'll head out there. And there were, I think the Citadel was graduating, University of or whatever. There were several schools having graduation. It was Mother's Day weekend. A lot of stuff was going on in Charleston, and so we couldn't really get into much of anything. And as the day is wearing on, we get to about 4 o'clock and decide, hey, let's just go ahead and head out to the plantation now. We'll get there way early, but in the event that there's some traffic problems, we'll be fine. If we get lost, there's plenty of time to get there. And what we'll do is keep our eyes peeled and see if there is an ice cream place, because it was blistering hot, terribly muggy and humid. Maybe we can find an ice cream place on the way to this wedding. Anyway, so we make our way to this plantation, and as we're getting closer to it, we keep our eyes peeled, looking for an ice cream shop, but we just can't find one. So we thought, well, we'll just go ahead and go to the plantation. We pull in, and I was surprised to see how many cars were already there. Now, I fully anticipated the wedding party would be there because they're meeting with the photographer and the bride with the bridesmaids getting pictures and the groom with the groomsmen and family photos. And all these pictures are getting done before the ceremony. But I was surprised to see that so many people outside the wedding party were already there. And it is late May, but it's record heat in Charleston. The humidity is oppressive. And I'm thinking, I can't believe that all these people are getting here so early to just go sit outside in this baking sun waiting for this wedding to start another hour and 15 minutes away. But I park, I get out of the car, and I head over to where the wedding ceremony is going to take place outside this plantation. As I do, one of the first people I see is the groom, and he comes up to me and he says, well, thank the Lord you're here. We were beginning to get worried. I said, well, the wedding doesn't start till 6. He said, no, it starts at 5. And so I'm thinking, I've got an hour and 15 minutes. I had less than 15 minutes before the bride is walking down the aisle. And all I could say to him was, thank God I didn't find an ice cream shop. But he said this to me in response. It's okay, because we wouldn't have started it without you. There are some perks sometimes to being the preacher. Because the truth is, they could have had a processional. They could have had music. They could have had a solo. They could have had a recessional. They could have had a reception. But they weren't going to have a wedding without the preacher. Nothing of consequence that day, of lasting consequence that day, was going to happen without me. It's a shame that so many of us do not have that same perspective about God in our lives. Because I want you to understand that is exactly the perspective that He wants us to have. That nothing of consequence is going to be experienced without Him. We talked about this a couple of weeks of the words of Jesus in John 15. You're familiar with them, where He said, I'm the vine, you are the branches. He that abides in me and I in him, the same brings forth much fruit. For apart from me, without me, you can do nothing. Nothing of consequence, nothing of lasting value, nothing of spiritual longevity, nothing of spiritual significance, nothing of eternal value can be done apart from God. But Lone Rangers, they don't operate with that in mind. They operate like Saul. Something has got to be done. I know all there is to know about this. We can't wait any longer. My abilities are completely sufficient. The truth is that my abilities and your personal abilities are sufficient to do nothing of lasting positive consequence. Listen, when you and I fail to wait on God, what we are effectively doing is thumbing our noses at the God of the universe, and we're saying to Him, I don't need your power. I don't need your perspective. I don't need your limitless ability. I don't need your limitless knowledge, because me and my little pea brain, I've got everything figured out. And me with my little Popeye muscles, I can take care of this all on my own. Is that what you want to say? Is that what you want to be expressing to God? Well, when you decide you're not going to wait on Him, that's exactly what you're doing. You're saying my perspective, compared to yours, it's fully accurate. And my abilities, they're completely sufficient. I can do this without you. But there's another final reason that we do this, and that's because we believe our actions are effectively inconsequential. We believe our actions are effectively inconsequential. So we've read Saul's response that you see it that's summarized at the end of verse 12. Saul says to Samuel and effectively to God, I felt compelled and offered a burnt offering. The enemy was close. People were deserting. If we didn't attack, they were going to. Sacrifices had to be offered. I knew all that there was to know. I've seen this sacrifice offering thing done 1,000 times before. Figured I could do this on my own, and so I had no other choice. I felt compelled to do this. In response, Samuel, the prophet of God, responds. And he's essentially not just offering what he has to say, but what God has to say on the matter. He says to Saul, you have done, you've acted, you've chosen foolishly. You've not kept the commandment of the Lord your God, which he commanded you. Now the Lord would have established your kingdom over Israel forever, but your kingdom shall not continue. And this, Samuel is saying to Saul, it was God's intention, and it was his original plan that you would have a long, lengthy reign, and that from you there would be a dynasty of family succession, that your son Jonathan would be the next king, and then his son would be the next king, and there would be this dynasty that has begun with you. You have this long reign, and then the throne stays within your family. But he says, now that's not going to happen. Furthermore, he says that God has already sought for himself a man after his own heart. We know who that is. That becomes David. And the Lord has commanded him to be commander over his people because you have not kept what the Lord commanded you. Let me just paint the picture in plain, simple brass tacks. Saul is given not simply an opportunity, but a commandment to wait on God. He looks at the circumstances, tells himself, hey, listen, I know all there is to know about this. This is something I can take care of on my own. I don't have to have God. I don't have to wait on the Lord. I don't have to wait on God's man. I can do this on my own. After all, he thinks, it's not that big of a deal. This won't cost me anything. And what is God saying to him? It's a big deal, and it's going to cost you big time. Your reign is going to be cut short, and from your family line, there is not going to be a dynasty. It's going to end. It's going to end with you, and God is already in the process of choosing the man that is going to be your replacement. Why did Saul behave in this way? Why did he choose to not wait on God? Because he told himself, it's effectively inconsequential. A number of years ago, I've shared this with you before, we had our home in Charlotte was broken into. And among the items stolen that day was a digital camera. A digital camera I had just purchased at Best Buy maybe 4 weeks before. This was also a time in our life. Nathan was not quite 2. Andrew was about a month old at this point. These are times and seasons of life where you take a lot of pictures. I mean, every time your baby does, let me get a picture of that, as if it's never been done before. Anyway, so we're taking all of these pictures, and now all of a sudden, this camera, which for parents of a newborn especially, this is a precious loss. And so it has been stolen, and I spoke with the insurance adjuster, and he explained to me it was going to be a period of days or maybe even a few weeks before everything was going to be taken care of, before they would cut me a check and I could begin the process of replacing the items that were stolen. And I explained to him, I said, listen, I just had a brand new camera stolen. One I had just bought a month before. And listen, we really need a camera. We're taking pictures all the time. We've got a less than a 2-year-old and a brand new baby. We're taking pictures all the time. I need a camera. He said, I'll tell you what, you can go ahead and go back to the store. You can buy the same camera again, and we'll count that towards your deductible. And so I'm telling myself, well, I know all there is to know. There is a loss of a camera. I need one. It's going to take a while for this to be settled. I don't have time to wait, and I can go buy this, and I'm not going to be out anything. All right, so this was on like a Tuesday of that week, and that night I'd gone out and I bought this same brand new camera again at Best Buy. By Friday afternoon late, we get a call from the police department, and they have located some of our items. Some of the items they have located include this digital camera, the one that I have just replaced. So earlier in the week, I've gone from one camera to no camera. By the end of the week, I've got two effectively brand new cameras. I don't want two brand new cameras. What I want is my money back. And so I take this one that I have just purchased and I go back to Best Buy to get my money back. Well, at that point, Best Buy had this lousy return policy, and I had to pay this 20% restocking fee. And so now I'm out 20%. If I had just waited, I would have been out nothing. But I decided, I know all there is to know. I can take care of this problem now without waiting on my own, and it's not going to cost me anything. But it cost me 20%. I want you to understand that Saul's refusal to wait on God, it cost him entirely more than a 20% restocking fee. And I want you to understand, in your life, your failure thus far to wait on God has already cost you a lot more than a 20% restocking fee. I wish I could change that for your life. I wish I could change it for mine, but I can't undo, and you can't undo, and God is not going to undo what has already been done. The past is behind us, so we're left in with this reality. We cannot change what has been done, but we can determine what will be done. You are going to have, perhaps even this week, and you may even now be wrestling with decisions and waiting on a response from God, and you're going to be faced with the temptation, do I continue to wait? Let me just tell you this. Hold your horses. Hold your horses. You don't know everything. I don't either. Your abilities, they're not limitless. And your failure to wait on God, it'll cost you. And it may cost you big. It cost Saul enormously big. Hold your horses, unless, of course, you want to be like a Saul. Unless, of course, you want to be a lone ranger, to get on your horse, say, hi-ho silver, and away, and live your life without God. My question then for you then very simply is this. Do you want to be a lone ranger? Or do you want to live a life and have a walk with God that's like this? Following His lead, and when He leads you to wait, you wait on Him. Won't you bow your heads with me?